Welcome to Star Citizen, the Alpha 3.12 and the big mining update guide. The mining has undergone some changes with the release of the new version, and therefore there is again a dedicated guide not only for beginners but also for advanced. I try in these areas to explain again everything there is to know about mining, and we will also deal with the new refinery stations, which are of course directly related to the mining. And at this point, a thank you to the helpers who contributed, Horizons McBlack and Valamaldoran. Thank you for your support with this guide. And since mining is a wide field and contains a lot of details, we have built the whole thing modular again, which means you can easily jump to the points that interest you or are interesting for you via the timestamps. In this guide we start with the basic preconditions and preparations for a mining tour, and then go into more and more detail. And before we fly off to mining, we first look at SC Trade Tools. This is my favorite mining tool or trade tool. Here we have under the tab Mining the choices of the different materials that we can mine. Here we can choose with which ship or what kind of mining we are planning today. And especially if we want to bring in a little more profit, it is worthwhile to make preparations here in any case. Under the price list we see which material we can currently sell for what price and what the whole thing brings us when we have refined it. Also new is a challenge rating, which means how hard it is to mine this material, and the sub-chunk priority, which means how big the chances are to mine a chunk of about 100% that we can then collect. A really cool feature, I think. Especially for refining, this value is very important, because here we want to have high quality materials with few impurities, so as little inert material as possible. The less impurities, the higher your profit. So for the professionals among you, who also want to achieve the maximum profit, make sure to collect as high quality material as possible. Because also the direct selling prices have about halved since the last update. That means if we want to sell materials without refining them before, we will only get about half of what we held before. And in order to achieve the best possible result, to keep the profit as high as possible, we select 3 materials here, where the chances of obtaining high quality and pure chunks, fragments, are very good. And we will then primarily mine these 3 materials for this guide. We have therefore selected laranite, terranite and agritium. Here we have a very high chance that we will always obtain 100% fragments and can almost arrive at the refinery with a full load of these materials, which also have a very good price. And also where there are these materials we have in this overview, and thus have our preparations for most lucrative round already completed. However, let's first take a look at where these new refinery stations can be found. There are a total of 5 of them, spread across the entire Stanton universe. On Argo we have Arc L1, on Crusader Crew L1, and on Hurston we have 2 stations, L1 and L2. And on Microtech we have also a refinery station, MIC L1. These all differ optically to relatively large extent, that is, the color of the nebula and also the stations themselves are different. Striking are the refinery stations themselves, which are really very long and visually definitely make something here. Because the new refinery stations are also the points where we can sell the materials directly or use the refinery function, that is, as before on Port Olisar, quickly sell your material, that is no longer possible. On the stations you can find your way to the new refinery stations via the inner station transit. These elevators marked in green. These are marked with refinery, and after a somewhat longer elevator ride, you will then also come out at the refinery stations. The whole thing is visually very impressive, and I recommend that you bring some time with you and explore these stations for the first time. But not only visual, the stations, that is here refinery decks, make a lot. We can sell as said our material, that is our raw material, directly from one of our ships, but for about half the price as before, or use the new refinery system to increase our income again. However, that's not all. There is a mining support center store. Here we can buy everything around mining and also rent the ships accordingly. And the tip before, here the prices are very good. That means we have here about half of the prices which we have paid otherwise on other stations or planets. Everything that has to do with mining is here about 50% cheaper than it was before on the main planets. And here we really get a full equipment. For rock mining or for hand mining, the most important suits, the multi-tool, including all attachments, or even the beginner MagFlag backpack. But also for ship mining, we get different mining heads, all consumables, and also a rental console we find here. Look at the whole thing, and especially the Helix mining laser for 54,000 USC is a real bargain. But one thing in advance, the mining lasers had also been changed again and are not longer with the values as we know them. However, we will look at that in really detail later. What has changed here? On the rental console we can borrow the 3 important ships really cheap for the rock, 3,500 USC, prospector for the entry into the ship mining for 43,000 USC, and the transport for the rock, the Cutlass Black, for just under 40,000 USC. But let's finally start mining directly at the station. These have asteroids all around which are already suitable for beginners or for a borrowed prospector. These don't have the highest values, that is the best materials in the highest concentrations, but for the beginning in any case sufficient. Should you be on the road with a borrowed prospector, you have the coast here quickly back in. And how you mine we look at now. First start with the scanner. With the tab key we get into the scanner mode. Here we see these white lines, and if we scroll up and down with the mouse wheel, we change our scanner radius. The radius indicates in which area, that is which extension we scan. If we increase the resolution, that is, the further our scanner beam goes, the lower the probability of pinpointing targets. That is, the narrower we set our beam, the more accurate and precise the results will be. I would recommend a scanner range of 2 to 4 in the beginning. And since the visibility is often poor, that is, the numbers can no longer be read, you simply go to the options menu and change your contrast value here. We see a higher contrast value here, and the number is already no longer readable at all, and with it in the mining menu. That is, the mining UI can be relatively difficult to recognize this way, especially on bright planets. Therefore we change the contrast to 40. Here we see everything again, and also on bright planets we have then here again a really good view also at the mining UI. With the tab key we already selected the scanner mode, and if we now hold down the right mouse button and release it when the circle is closed, we have the maximum scanner power in the scanner resolution we selected. Here we have already detected 4 targets and they disappear after a short time. If we set a new scanner impulse, then we see our targets again. Also in the outside view you have the possibility here, whereby here the overview and the spatial representation is again better. After we have spotted the target, we just fly towards it and change the scan resolution a bit and just scan until we see the stone with a yellow border. As soon as we close enough, we can simply scan the stones in the scanner mode by holding the left mouse button. That means you see a blue bar, and as soon as this is full we have collected all the informations about the stone and get the detailed values displayed on the right side. Here it should be noted that there are 2 scanner views, one is the scanner mode here and one again in the mining mode. In mining mode we have a slightly different display but the same values, and also the duration of the scan is the same. But of course we look at this scanner setting that is working in mining mode also again in detail. The stones have all different values and we always assume at 100% value. That is, we have here about 7% borace, 7% gold and about 40% corundum. That is, the remaining shards of the stones are inert materials. These are worth nothing and we get here also nothing. How we collect, if possible, only high quality material is explained in the later part again more exactly. Now it goes around the basic mining for beginners. With the M key we come into the mining mode, and if we press here with our mining laser the left mouse button, then we have our mining beam. This laser has different achievements, which we can adjust with the mouse wheel. With the mouse wheel upward we see on the left the semicircle with 100%. Is on the right side, we get the announcement how much energy is already contained in our stone. And we have to keep an eye on this energy. That means we have an optimal range displayed in green and a red range. That means to crack the stone, that means to break it into smaller pieces, we have to get into the green range with our mining energy. The energy in the stone, and hold it until it is completely filled. As soon as it is completely filled, the stone break apart into smaller fragments, which we then in turn break up and finally collect. That's how mining works in basic. However, there are of course some things to keep in mind here. If we get too much energy in the stone, we get into the red zone, and the stone then breaks, we can't get the stone to cool down without energy, we can suffer considerable damage or even lose our entire ship and the cargo, so always make sure to stay in the green zone with the mining laser. Here, however, everything went well and we broke the stone into smaller fragments, which still have a yellow-orange hug. If we now go at it with our mining laser, our ship automatically, passively scan the stone and we get a display on the right again of what the composition of the individual fragment is. We break the stone until we have purple-edged stones, which we can then also pick up. Here, for example, we have a proportion of about 40% borates and 85% inert materials. For us, of course, the borates is of value. And here we have already lasered something into the red area, and here we simply have to let the stone cool down. That means we do not generate any further energy in the red area. Then the whole thing is sufficient and the stone cools down again slowly. Should you have applied too much energy, simply stop the energy completely and approach the stone again after cooling down. And this was the short version, therefore we look at the whole again in more detail. Namely, we fly here after Magda. Enclosed you have here a list on which planets and on which moons or in which asteroid fields you with which materials can count. This list find you also in the link as complete overview, and again, a cordial thank to the creator. Blastoman 2 from the Lost Soli Corp is the creator here, and he deserves the thanks. Many thanks for providing this overview to us. And in connection with SC Trade Tools, that is, knowing what materials we are looking for, we set out for Magda. After the first hours of mining in 3.12, I would recommend you to mine on planets or moons. Here we had mostly higher quality materials and especially in higher concentrations, especially in direct comparison to the asteroid around the station. The differences are significant. Of course, the distances are longer and the risks are higher, but the yield is much more lucrative. Therefore, we currently give the clear recommendation to mine material on planets and moons, especially with the prospector. We have already scanned the first stones here and here in the scanner mode. This works as described before, also on planets in the same way. That is, we can simply scan a targeted stone with the left mouse button in the scanner mode. However, scanning also works in the mining mode. Here we do not have to press the left mouse button but simply target, and our scanner automatically scans the target occurrence. Therefore, my recommendation: as soon as we have found some stones, switch to mining mode, then you save the pressing and holding of keys. However, should you slip from the target, the scan result is also gone for the time being and you have to start the scanning again completely. Because in new mining mode, we now also have a display of speed and the preset flight data. On the far left, we have the preset maximum speed and also the mining consumables are directly displayed to us. The right side is only concerned with the scanning as well as the mining material as well as the corresponding values. As far as the flight is concerned, we can only give thrust or break back the thrust, that is, we cannot directly change the preset maximum speed in mining mode. Here we have to go out for mining mode again and go into the flight mode, in order to adjust the speed here if necessary. However, even in mining mode, controlling and flying the ship is now possible without problems. The mining of material is done again in mining mode. That means after pressing the M key and the left mouse button we activate the mining laser. Here we see a semicircle on the right area, where we find the green target area, which is also highlighted in green. On the left side we have here, as mentioned, the energy which we provide with the mouse wheel. However, there is not only energy with which we can work, but also the distance. Here we also increase the energy that arrives in a stone. That means, should you have problems with a stone, just fly as close as possible to this stone. And also the difference between outside and inside view is sometimes considerable. In the inside view we often have the feeling that we are about to crash into the stone, but there are still few meters of space between them. And whether you can crack a stone or not depends on several factors. First of all, the mining laser of your use, how strong the energy is that arrives in the stone, and also how big the stone is. Large chunks of about 7 to 8,000 kilograms even a better helix mining laser does not manage. Here we need either mining consumables or the help of another player. Also for such stones an Argo Mole is advantageous. In this case the energy of the conditions were sufficient and we were able to split the large stones into several fragments. These are still outlined in yellow, which means that they are not yet ready for collection and we must continue to split them. We therefore scan the individual fragments and see here, for example, a relatively high composition of terranite in this stone. That is, this would then be worthwhile to split again, and with a little luck we get some high quality chunk, that is, collectible parts, which we then still collect and take with us. Then with mining an important basic rule applies: the more inert materials, less waste you take along, the less and smaller your profit turns out. That is, even if you can take along, for example, from the high quality material about 10% and 90% of this dirt is present, your profit is very small. That is, pay attention to take along really only high quality materials in your nevertheless limited hold. Here, for example, we have found a fragment which has 0% inert material with it. All through, there is also a relatively high gold content, so also as less lucrative material, but you should still make sure to crack such opportunities in any case. Here we do not have the opportunity to fill our hold with absolute useless material. Rather, we have here the opportunity to break the terranite, which is also still about 30% concentration in the piece, from the stone and bring in a good profit. And which materials are worth collecting or valuable, we have already looked at SC trade tools or in the mining overview. Here you should just stick to these values because they are really balanced for a long time, and even with the refinery system has changed relatively little here. As soon as we have crushed one of the larger fragments again, we then also have the collectible materials, which we can then also transport directly into our hold. Here we still have some overload and we already see that our shields have received damage and the stones are distributed. To load the purple outlines on collectible pieces, we click on the right mouse button and get another beam. This extraction beam we activate again with the left mouse button and we collect the material. Here we have, for example, a very high gold content, but also the more valuable terranite with it. The 100% gold content we can also load directly into our hold. Higher or better profits are always given if we choose exactly what we really take in the hold and are really very selective here. That is, if we only want to pack laranite, terranite or agritium, then we should simply fly to the nearest stone here to achieve the maximum yield. But especially for beginners, this makes sense in the beginning to concentrate on at least not collecting inert materials. Here you can gradually increase the yield today and familiarize yourself with the different materials and stones. More for the advanced miner is the next section indeed. Namely, we are here still on Magda and the current topic is to so-called sweet spot of the stones. That is, to achieve the maximum effect with our mining laser and our equipment on the stones, we must find the sweet spot of a stone. And for this there are some helps how we also achieve this. Especially better stones with higher values are often at the limit of what can be done with a standard laser. Here, for example, we have a relatively strong stone with 4,300 kilograms, which absorbs relatively little energy even at 100% power. To either speed up the whole thing here or make it possible in the first place, we could either use mining consumables or change the ship's position. With stones that are difficult to laser, it makes sense to stand almost vertically above the stone and laser from top to bottom. We also slowly see a sweet spot here, luminous lines that appear in the stone. At these fracture edges we have more possibilities to bring energy into the stone. If we then move our mining laser into these regions, we see a sudden increase in energy. The energy is more effective here. With this stone, the power would have been sufficient for a longer period of time, but we can reduce our mining times again here. And later we take another look at a stone that we would not have been able to crack with a normal mining laser. Here we have then pulled out all the stops to crack a large chunk. And as mentioned, the distance to the stone is of course one of the factors that can make the difference. And as soon as you feel a bit safer, you can also continue mining at night without any problems. Apart from a slightly limited view, we don't really have any restrictions here and can activate our light on the ship with the L key, which definitely gives us sufficient lighting conditions, especially in the close range. However, even if we switch off the light, the contours are clearly visible, and this can sometimes lead to a better overview when we want to find individual boulders, which are always displayed outlined for us. But especially concerning mining on planets that is in atmospheres and especially atmospheric influences, I would recommend you to adjust your loadout. In contrast to the previous version, this loadout has become much more important because the influences and the effects on our ships are clearly noticeable. And as far as the equipment is concerned, let's look at an example. The mining heads have also changed significantly. In the previous versions, it was the standard to go out with a Helix mining laser. Whether on the Argo Mole or on the Prospector, the Helix was always by far the strongest. That hasn't really changed, however, the other mining heads are all quite recommendable alternatives and are more or less recommendable depending on the purpose and playstyle. But due to the fact that the equipment has become such a bit or important part, let's look at it again in detail. However, we want to sell our materials first. At the refinery station we can do this via the previous trading consoles, where we can sell our mined raw material directly. Here, however, we only get about half as much as before. And this is where the new refinery system comes into play. Here I strongly recommend a dedicated refinery guide which shows you how to get the most out of your mined material. Here profit increases of 150% compared to direct sales, and definitely possible, because especially for advanced miners, refinery is worthwhile in any case. But as promised, we now come to the recommended loadout for a standard prospector. We use the Helix mining laser, which currently offers the highest energy rate and is so far also the strongest mining laser in general. And since we have to cover longer distances to the stations, I recommend not to save on the quantum drive and choose a military variant here. As a cooler, either industrial cooler, that is the cool core which are installed here, and the power plant is equipped with an industrial variant such as the Dylan's in any case well. For the shields I recommend you not to choose too energy hungry ones, because otherwise we can get problems with our power plant, or better said, the energy supply. The weapons are a matter of taste, but we should not use them with the prospector anyway. Let's go to the most important components for mining, namely the mining laser and also the mining consumables. These are, to be clear, mandatory for the current version, if you want to crack more than standard stones or even stones that can be very lucrative. In the area of mining laser, we limit ourselves to 3 mining lasers, which I would recommend to you. We start with the Helix, which also the best known. It still has the highest energy output, which can be delivered into the stone, and it is basically still very strong. However, the disadvantages are not to be denied. The Helix has a relatively high delay, which means that when we increase or decrease the energy, we have a significant delay in the amount of energy that reaches the stone, so we have to work very carefully and pay attention to this delay. In addition, the shutter damage is very high, which we quickly come into the red area to overload. Another recommendation and almost a secret tip is the lens laser. This reduces the resistance and instabilities of the stone very significantly, and this offers the most optimal window for mining. That is, the green area is the largest here, and also the danger of overloading is very low with the lens. The disadvantages are less energy than the Helix mining laser, but with a mining consumable like the Surge, the Lancet is definitely recommendable for larger and lucrative stones. And another plus point is that it is very cheap at 11,700 UAC. The third in the group is the impact laser. This is a good middle value or a good alternative between the other 2 lasers. However, here the overcharge rate is much faster and higher, so I would recommend the impact only to experienced miners. And in the area of mining consumables, we limit ourselves to the most important ones. These all have 5 charges before they are used up, so we can use a consumable 5 times. The Surge is the most important. It is available for 1400 UEC and offers a very strong energy boost, so it is perfect for very massive and energy-hungry chunks. But be aware, the effect is immediate. Also, the overcharge rate and shutter damage is increased by 100 and 200% respectively, so before using it we should have an overview of how much energy we are getting into the stone at once through the Surge. And what it looks like when you use a Surge in an obviously hopeless stone, we see here in a moment. The second and one of the most important consumables is the lifeline for 400 USC. This reduces the damage of the shutter enormously and also the overcharge rate by 90%. This is a fail-safe consumable, so to speak. In case something should go wrong during mining, you can always ignite this to save an overloaded stone. The optimum consumable for 1500 USC is expensive, but increases your green range about 75%, making mining much easier. Especially for Quantanium, or material that has a very small green range, the first choice. And the last consumable is the brand for 2200 USC, and therefore also the most expensive. This is recommended for a very unstable stone. It reduces the instability by 75% and increases the speed until the stone is cracked by 25%. This is therefore only worthwhile with really lucrative stones. And by the way, you have to attach consumables to your mining laser via the Lodout manager before takeoff. Depending on which laser you use, you have more or less possibilities to take consumables with you. With the Helix, for example, we have 3 slots and we can activate them with Alt 1, 2, 3 keys. We have the search, as we see here on the left on the top slot, and we activated it with Alt and 1. And then see a timer expire here for how long it will be active. As far as the equipment components are concerned, especially the mining lasers, the differences here are not as significant as they used to be. A Helix mining laser, for example, has only slightly more energy than its competitors, but the difference in the behavior of the laser are much more noticeable and precisable. For larger chunks, or rather the more lucrative materials, and really for worldwide stones, we were either depend on help from another prospector or through the compelling use of mining consumables. So mining in general develops more game depth, and we are definitely forced here to plan ahead more for our mining excursions. And with the refinery system, which also came with 3.12, the whole thing has additional depth. We have to decide here if we want to make a quick profit, sell the raw materials below value, or sell here up to triple values for the perfect refined material, which we have to transport again with a cargo ship afterward through. The refinery system is a class of its own, and I would recommend you to watch the dedicated refinery guide, which will be available on the channel soon. Here we will discuss the different refinery methods, the different refinery stations, and how you can combine which bonuses. And in any case, you wondered why we didn't mention Quantanium in this guide or only touched on it? Quantanium is not for a beginner, because with the current version we now need a lot more preparation for it, and we should already be very familiar with mining. However, to practice or to get to know mining, it is definitely worth flying in an Argo Mole, where you have support, we can crack any stone, and just learning mining from the beginning. And if you are interested in such team actions, then have a look at our Discord. We are regularly on the road with the mining ships, whether in Argo Mole or with several prospectors, and have already made one or the other experience with the beginners. So just drop by and join us. I hope you liked the video and you leave me a like and a subscribe here. Mining, especially in combination with the refinery system, brings a whole new depth to play to Star Citizen and the Alpha 3.12. Of course, the prices for raw materials have been halved because we already got the full prices in the previous mining system, so the change is a bitter at first, because now we get only half of the profit with the same load. But it's really like that we can pack a bonus on top with the refinery system. However, the whole thing costs time and effort, but this effort runs in the background, and we do not have to be active in the game here. Therefore, patience is rewarded with it, and we only have to transport the whole thing from A to B, which is quite possible with a smaller merchant ship or even with beginner ships that we can borrow. I for one find the new mining system exciting in any case, and it's fun to experience more game depth. But here I would be interested in your opinions and comments. Just write it in the comments, I will try answer all of them. And of course, there is a current giveaway going on, a Nomad with lifetime insurance, presented by Star Hangar, your safe marketplace where you can shop all year round, and also find any ship. And the most important part, always at the end, a big thank you to all Patreons and channel members Without you, this would not be possible in this form. You guys rock. I say goodbye, until soon, and say as always, see you in the verse.